Can I ask you kind of I don't know if this is going to sound like something of a strange question or a weird question, but I've seen plenty of photographs of burned up vehicles with burned up people inside. I've seen
Yeah.
some pretty bad stuff, and I'm sure you've seen it in person, and so the people that you work with. Is there any sort of training or preparation for seeing the kind of really tough things that you as firefighters may have to see from time to time? Because this is the kind of thing like that can cause people some PTSD and things like that. I mean, I would imagine as a Marine Corps officer, you might be a little bit more resilient when it comes to things like that. But for example, for the people that are firefighters that have never been Marine officers or seen this sort of thing, like what do you do to help your firefighters when they come upon these grotesque scenes and there's dead bodies and really bad stuff? Like how do you handle that? How do you take care of your folks?
Yeah, that's a terrific question. We talked a little bit about post-traumatic stress and the concepts of resilience and then post-traumatic growth
Yeah.
In the previous podcast. And I'm a huge believer in preparing yourself prior to showing up on scene of something like this. And truthfully, Brian, you show up to some of these scenes and they're either, I don't want to say physically gruesome, but they tug at your heartstrings so much, and everybody reacts differently to different situations. I, for instance, am really susceptible to having a very strong emotional reaction to incidents where children are hurt or injured or sick. I think probably because I have children, and I'm sure you're probably in the same boat, but
yeah,
everybody reacts differently to all these different scenes. And I think, unfortunately, there's no real way of knowing how you'll react until you're tested with some of those different scenarios. And then the other thing is, truthfully, once you thought you'd seen it all, something else comes and replaces it. And whether it's, I've never seen anything this ridiculous before, or this hair raising before, or this bloody before, and then something else will come and replace it. I'm a huge proponent of preparing yourself mentally prior to going into a scenario like that. A lot of that might involve emergency scene simulations, where you're putting yourself in the driver's seat and imagining what a response like that will be like. I have a real good friend who's he's a lieutenant for the city of Boston Fire Department, and they were one of the first units on scene after the Boston marathon bombing.
Oh man!
And they arrived on scene, and it was absolutely chaotic. And he had really started to explore the concept of hardening yourself physically and mentally to a scenario like that prior to showing up on scene. And he had actually he co-authored a book that assisted in preparing yourself mentally. It's called Fire Psyche. And,
really nice. Fire Psyche. Yeah.
It's kind of just, it's touching on, it's sort of in its infancy in the fire service. Whereas I think for the military and professional sport, the concept of mental preparation in advance of this really grueling physical and psychological activity that you're about to take place in has been recognized as hugely beneficial for athletes, law enforcement, military for years now, maybe even decades. And they're sort of perfecting it. Whereas for the fire service, we're sort of just now jumping on board with it. But I talked to him a little bit about it, and he had literally handed a copy of this book to all of his firefighters. I think it may have been on the day that they responded to this emergency, and he was kind of like, oh man, why have I not addressed this sooner with these guys? And it's everything from breathing techniques to negative thought stopping, and some of these things that pro athletes have used for years now that allow them to be at the very top of their game, and physical conditioning being one of those elements like we talked about earlier.
For sure.
And
Tom Watson, who's a famous golfer, I think he won 8 or 9 majors. He has a famous saying. He goes, "I didn't win a major until I learned how to breathe properly on the golf course."
Sure.
But Nick, I'm sitting here thinking about, there was a incredibly tragic crash probably almost 2 decades ago in Houston, where a family of 3 kids, a mom went to pick up dad from the airport. He had been away at work, and they were driving home, and essentially an 18-wheeler tipped over on the truck. that they were all in, and mom survived and everybody else burned alive over a period of time. And so, you know,
Right.
and firefighters have to see that sort of thing regularly. And so I'm a little surprised that it's not a little bit more advanced in terms of preparing firefighters for that thing, because, you know, I would think that firefighters see that just as much, if not more, as any other first responders, EMS, police, right? I mean, you're seeing it just as much, right?
Yeah, yeah. But let me say this. So firefighting is a 200-year-old career,
Yeah.
unimpeded by progress. So, you know, a lot of the changes that you talk about making, and I would say even more so than the military, it is very entrenched and very steeped in
Yeah.
tradition and history. And I spoke to another friend of mine who's a lieutenant for the FDNY in New York, and we were talking about some of the effects that COVID had when everything was kind of ground zero there in Manhattan.
Yeah.
And he said he saw more change in a 12-hour shift on a daily basis than he had seen in a decade there.
Wow.
Because just by the nature of the threat that was posed to them, you had to be that flexible, and their entire organization, which hadn't seen systemic change, was changing daily, which is really kind of astounding when you consider the fire service. And I don't mean to say that the fire service hasn't made strides in the psychological and physical preparation. Within our organization, we have what's called the CISD, or Critical Incident Stress Debriefing Team, of members who are trained to deal with those really high stress responses, and they will respond to, you know, the location of the response or to the fire station after you've gone on that response, and help get you the psychological assistance that you need, whether it's debriefing with them or with a professional.
Yeah.
We also do a lot of preparation physically. You know, we have a wellness program that, you know, aims to educate us in practices such as good sleep, healthy diet, physical and mental preparation for the rigors of the job, like we talked about, and then just the concept of resilience and post-traumatic growth that you and I have spoken about, that I really kind of preach to my firefighters, but that I feel like everybody should take on as sort of a physical, a personal responsibility, just as making yourself as capable as you can be in order to face the rigors of the job.